rotting meat which only a ton of spices could make palatable. There were hundreds of bylaws which were used to prosecute cooks and butchers if they were discovered attempting to sell rotting food. Such erroneous impressions also ignore the fact that large carcasses were valued as live creatures which were labouring hard in the fields. You did not slaughter them until they were too old to work, nor, as meat was so precious, did you cook them without great care and skill. Besides, the wide variety of recipes for sauces to have with different meats would delight any gastronome of whatever era and must surely impress us with the culinary expertise of the medieval cook. Throughout the period of the first part of this book, there were ceaseless struggles between the princes, the church and the nobility for their share and control in the produce of the land. In the course of the 12th and 13th centuries, a further group emerges, the privileged town dwellers, the traders who were to become the bourgeoisie. In England, they played a particularly influential role at an early date on our food and cooking. Food was to play a part as a visible celebration of power and affluence in the struggle between the various elites, and food was also the source, if not an integral part, of the wealth of the new bourgeoisie. When the sumptuary laws began and stopped tells us much about bourgeois affluence and pretension. For instance, refer to Chapter 3 for information on the spices in the City of London in the 12th century under Henry II. These traders provide an important clue to how much the new Anglo-Norman nobility treasured the use of spices in their cooking, which meant how much they cared about the flavour and the recipes. Fashion is also a guide. In ages where male courtiers were concerned about the length of hems, shoes and hair, that same aesthetic selectiveness operated at the table. It is unimaginable that such an immaculate and perfumed society sat down to eat coarsely while the fat ran down their chins. There are close connections between the food we eat and the tumultuous events that made us into the British nation. Meat eating is thought to be central to the British diet, but it is not as simple as that. The history of the vegetable garden in Britain reveals the cultivation of a huge range of vegetables, so though they are not mentioned in the early cookery books, we know they were eaten and enjoyed. Tudor meat-eating was stressed at the time and afterwards to draw a clear distinction between what a devout Protestant, and therefore a true Englishman, ate, as opposed to Catholic Europe and Papist families here, who secretly continued to eat what were basically medieval dishes. Food reflects everything. It is a microcosm of what is shaping the world at the time. What you eat and how you eat it are the product of what you are doing there and then. We have contemporary examples of this from the Mass Observation Archive. There can be great ironies, as in the terrifying tragedy of the Black Death, which nevertheless led to improvements in the economy of the peasants. It finally led them to building their own bread ovens and the beginning of rural baking, which became the essence of our own peasant cuisine, just as the series of Enclosures Acts eventually destroyed it. The Reformation radically changed what we ate, as did the rise of a rich bourgeoisie in the same century, as did the execution of a monarch, sea voyages of exploration, the legislative oppression of Roman Catholics, the early rise of capitalism on these islands, the vanishing peasant, the solid Hanoverian sensibility, the abundance of country estates, the spread of industry, rails and road, the sadomasochism of the Victorian nonconformists, and much, much more. Throughout these events, there is an ever-growing sense of Britishness, but it was at the end of the medieval period that the distinctive characteristics of our food were melded together into one. But how and when did we begin to believe that our food was inferior? At the beginning of the 19th century, distinguished gastronomes considered our cuisine to be the greatest in Europe. How, then, did it get a reputation of being so unremittingly disgusting? Why did we think it boring, bland, tasteless, and utterly unworthy of the attention of a true gourmet? Basically, good fresh produce was ruined by a lack of culinary skill. A dozen or so factors contributed to the decline of our food, not least that it was spurned and thoroughly neglected. Through diffidence and even at times active dislike, we had allowed our food to become unremittingly mediocre. Up to the midst of the 19th century, our food had had epochs and phases of greatness which we threw away. Moreover, we not only threw it away, but forgot all about it. This book is an attempt to revive our knowledge of the gastronomic importance of British cuisine, in the belief that we can be genuinely proud of it, and with a passionate hope that we can restore many of